Welcome to part 4 of our Business Prosperity During Pandemic webinar series. The webinar is part of a series of free webinars that TaxForward will be offering on how to navigate through this environment. 3 more webinars will be announced early next week, one following up on our tax webinar early today, one on the impact on real estate and leases, and it's on HR and job search matters. We want to hear your questions. You can send us questions confidentially or to the group through the chat and Q&A features, which is on the Zoom software. Polls will occasionally pop up during our webinar. This is both to engage attendees as well as for CPE certification purposes. Complete the polls to receive CPE certification. You'll receive a survey at the end of the webinar. The responses are anonymous. Please help us improve our webinars by completing the survey. The surveys will close Monday night at midnight. We will email CPE certificates once the surveys are completed. You will receive more information about both in an email after this webinar. Seminars from the webinars will be posted on our site next week. If you hear or learn of something we should share with others, such as tools or guidance that is out there, please send us an email at info@taxforward.org, and we'll be sending you an email, so you'll also have this email address. Copies of the webinar will become available after the weekend. So now we go into introductions, and then following we'll start the questionnaires. So with introductions, my name is Sly Giffard. Best way to really represent myself, I graduated from college about 3 years ago in tax specifically, and unfortunately I'm trying to get away from that and follow my passion, which is in the investment business. So I currently manage a fund with a few investors, and I'm actively involved in the market. So the next person we have is Chrissy.
Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy Palestine. I'm a CPA and a CMA. I started off my career about 10 years ago as an audit associate at KPMG, and then I went over to the E470 Public Highway Authority. My last position at E470 was the Finance and Budget Manager. So I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about some personal budgeting tips and best practices.
And next we're going to have Matt.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Morizio. I'm a financial advisor with Beck Bode. We're a registered investment advisor, which is just an independent investment firm in the greater Boston area. Specifically, I typically will work with individuals who often spend their entire lives focusing on their passion. It's often athletes, entrepreneurs, or executives in business that don't spend the time to learn about personal finances until it hits them in the face and they realize, wow, I got to do something with this money. So right now is an awesome time for me because it's a really impactful moment for me to build relationships with a lot of existing clients and prospective new clients. So I'm excited to share any and all education on the markets and investing and personal finances as best I can.
Awesome. So now we'll dive into questions, and the webinar ends, we'll open to the audience for questions. And just remember, at any time during this webinar, if you do have a question, raise your hand. I think there's a button like that, and we will identify you and we'll answer your questions. So the first question would be to Matt. With the recent episode that's going on right now in the world, what do you tell people panicked about the recent turns in the stock market?
Yeah, I mean, at first and foremost, I acknowledge their panic and their anxiety and their fear because it's real and it's justified. So I get it. So the very first thing I'll say to people that come to me with fear and panic and anxiety is that, look, I get it. And I'm sorry that you're feeling that. I understand it. I get it. And every time there's been a market downturn, historically speaking, the downturn led with fear and anxiety of the unknown. From the Great Depression to the 2001, when terrorists flew buildings into the World Trade Center, to 2008, when we didn't understand how broken our banking system was until it broke. None of that up to that point seemed like a problem until it was. And now we have the coronavirus. We've never seen this virus in the history of the world. We're in unprecedented times, from unemployment rates to how quickly and rapidly the market has dropped. This has never happened before. So yes, I understand that fear and anxiety leads it. But I will also say that I always tell people, throughout all of these catastrophes, which on average, a correction, which is a 10%, between a 10 and 20% drop, happens every year if you go run the numbers, and a bear market, which is a greater than 20% drop, happens every 3 to 5 years. We always prevail. So we will figure this out just as we figured all the other problems out, but it's not easy to go through right now.
Awesome. So it seems right now there's a lot of people with what seemed to be a knowledge gap. Like we had a record year last year, and people took the opportunity in 2020 to begin dumping money in the markets, and some of those people got burned. And then on the flip side, there's also people who are on the side and think it's a good time to invest. So my question to you, Matt, is with this knowledge gap, I mean, why should someone work with a financial advisor?
So a financial advisor, honestly, you hire a financial advisor because they have an area of expertise that you either don't want to spend the time learning yourself, or you don't have the knowledge. You either don't have the time or you don't have the knowledge or the care to spend the time. So you're going to hire somebody to help manage your money. A lot of people you'll hear talk about like the human element, the coaching element. And while there's very much truth to that, like I've talked to a number of clients off the ledge, the truth is, if you do need just exclusively a life coach, like hire a life coach. A financial advisor should be there to ask you the tough questions and pose the hard scenarios of, look, I know you don't want to lose money, but the opportunity cost, which I think is what you're getting to, that knowledge gap of saying, okay, you invested last year, it was high. Now you're in it for a year and a half, not even, and your bottoms out from the lowest in 3 years. Where do I go from here? And an advisor can really help you understand that when you got into this thing, you got into it for the long term, hopefully 5+ years. Those are the people I work with. So I don't work with the traders, which I would define as somebody who's looking at like a 1 year timeline of trading or less. So if you're looking at a long term, working with an advisor can help you not only with the planning piece, but also help you understand the opportunity cost of pulling out the cash and trying to time things versus riding the wave and making smart strategic decisions while remaining invested.
Awesome. And so I know like the stock market is a huge asset class. It's what's commonly recommended. Is there any other products that that you usually recommend to clients?
Yeah, we're a little bit unique as a firm because we don't use products technically. So we're investing in individual stocks, which is what the market is made up of, is a collection of a bunch of stocks and or bonds. So when you refer to the term securities, it's anything that's governed under the Securities Exchange Commission, really. So we don't use in particular products, but I often recommend whatever the best opportunity to get that client to achieve their goal over the long term would be. For us, we're really good at the stocks and individual securities, so that's what we look at. We're not the right fit for everybody, but that's not to say that there are other securities. So when you talk about different asset classes, it's either stocks, bonds, or cash, and the rest fall under the alternative category, which there's a whole lot of them, from fine arts to venture capital to options to futures to commodities. There's a lot of real estate is a big one. There are different investments that work well for people, and some of those roads all lead to Rome per se. But I really think that if you're investing when it's tied to a goal, you can better lay the roadmap to figure out how to get there. Meaning, you know where you're trying to go. Let's now back into it and figure out which assets make the most sense to help you get there. Maybe it's not to grow really quickly. Maybe it's to grow slowly, because slow growth will help you get your goal. So really, the asset class is very, very dependent on where you're trying to go. And it's very difficult to come up with a game plan if you have no idea what the end is.
Awesome. So the we're gonna move along on our questions list here, and I guess that the next question will be asked by Matt.
Oh, you know what? I had to switch over from my computer to my phone, so now I can't toggle screens because my connection, my Bluetooth connection wasn't working. So I apologize. I'm unprepared.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Am I breaking up? So yeah, I would just can I call in relief on the question, because I had to switch over to my phone, so now I can't toggle screens like I was able to on my computer.
This is a question for Sly.
Yeah.
So what is your approach to investing during these times?
So basically, I consider myself an algorithmic trader, which means I create codes in the market that basically say if this then this, and I know the historical probabilities of everything I do. And I guess the reason I decided to take this approach is, as we should know, most people don't beat the stock market's returns over time, which is like the U.S. stock market is a famous benchmark. It's the S&P 500, and over the last like 20 or 25 years, it has returned about a 7 or 7.5% average annual return, with about a 56% max drawdown. And the reason I believe that the market beats most people over time is because the market is just an algorithm. It's basically, it says, take the 500 largest companies, and then it has a revenue benchmark along with other things. And the stock market just executes its algorithm. But on the flip side, most people think they know what the market is going to do next, or they let like psychology interfere with the process. And so I think as an algorithmic trader, I am doing the same thing as the stock market. And as long as I'm able to execute flawlessly, I should generate returns. That's it.
So Matt, going back to you, what would you recommend people consider when they're are deciding their approach to investing and what to invest in?
Right. So I'm going to come from our perspective, where we are good at. So we have a very strict process that has to do with individual stocks exclusively. So for me, of course, my recommendation is going to be in that area, or it's go find somebody else that better suits your goals, your expectations. I will say that right now, it's a scary time to jump into stocks because of what you're seeing. The up and downs are outrageous. But I also look at that as quite an opportunity right now, because from our opinion, from our standpoint, we think there's going to be a tremendous rebound when it does happen. It may take some time, but there's real opportunity to make some good money in that rebound whenever it happens. And when it happens, your guess is as good as mine. There's no chance we can predict that future. All we're trying to do is position our clients to feel those wins when they start to happen, when they start to pile on each other. So I can't make a blanket recommendation, just because it really depends on what people are trying to do with their money and at what life stage they're at.
So speaking about life stages, there's different kinds of people. Some people are, I guess, just starting out in their career. They might not have a lot of cash, versus someone who's deeper in their career and they either have cash allocated to maybe their house or maybe a little bit in the stock market. So question for you, Matt, what can someone that is 2 to 10 years away from retirement, and with limited savings, or the next scenario could be like someone who has a house with some cash, what can those two groups of people start doing to start investing?
Yeah, there's going to be a situation where they're going to need to start to put money away as quickly as they can. If they're 2 to 10 years, if I heard this correctly, they're 2 to 10 years away with limited cash, but maybe house rich. So a lot of clients we work with in that scenario, where let's say they had a family when they were younger, families move out of the house has a lot of equity in it. They see that as an opportunity to, yes, get the equity out of the home and then get into an investment where it will grow and pay them simultaneously. And then at the same time, they can downsize the home, which really, in reality, is as much a lifestyle decision as it is a financial one, because you can, let's say it was a multi-floor home, two-story home. Sometimes they'll move into a ranch or a condo complex or something where a lot of the home ownership responsibilities are now gone, and it becomes an easier lifestyle, because that's kind of the goal as you get toward retirement. But I will say, if you're 2 to 10 years away, you're pretty cash poor, house rich, consider that opportunity as an opportunity to potentially sell, downsize, and really take advantage as you get that close to retirement. There are advantages to putting additional funds, they call them catch-up contributions, into your retirements, so you can max out even more than the typical investor that might be younger and not as close to retirement.
So I'd like to ask just a question.
Awesome. So it seemed like we received a question from the audience.
Sorry, Sly, go ahead.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just recent events. The House just passed the CARES Act, so I know most of us haven't had time to read that 1,200-page document that it is. But can you comment in any way about how the stimulus funds might be received?
Is this directed to? Is this an open-ended question?
Open-ended question.
Yeah, I can tell you what I've been seeing, at least preliminarily, because I have not dug into 1,200 pages either. Actually, after this webinar, I'm on a webinar that is going to dig into that a little bit more. But I'm seeing that it looks like single tax filers making 75K or less, adjusted gross income, married filing at 150K will receive $1,250 stimulus check, or is that right? I think that's right, per person in the household. So if it's a married couple that adjusted gross income under 150K or up to, they'll be getting a $2,500 check plus $250 per child. I have 5 children, so there's that. So I see that. I don't know how that's going to reflect in taxes. My gut ultimately tells me that in 2021 and beyond, we'll see tax brackets go up, because somehow we have to pay for these $2 trillion that we're finding. But business owners, there's opportunities in that CARES Act that they'll need to. There's not only that there'll be loans up to $10 million for business owners, which are loans. They'll have to pay a lot of that back. But embedded in those loans, I'm reading that there are certain expenses, so long as you're using that loan money toward the expense, like payroll expenses, for example, to keep your employees working, you actually can get those loan forbearance for those, and you won't have to pay that money back. There's also small business loans that even if you apply, I'm reading, you'll still get 10 grand, even if you get denied the small business loan. So there's a lot coming out, and then a lot happening really quickly. So it looks like potentially in the next few weeks, though, we'll just start seeing checks come in the mail for those that qualify. And they seem to be using previous year's tax records, W-2s, filings to determine who qualifies, from my understanding thus far.
This is Ashby Walters, the Executive Director of TaxForward. I'm just going to jump in real quick. So Matt, what you said, that's correct. They're on a lot of this. They're also going to continue to work on it once it's signed by the president. One of the other things too is that your 2019 taxable income can influence this. So Tony and Edie came out with this great article that goes over this. You can find that on our LinkedIn page if people want to go there. It should be posted on our LinkedIn page, but essentially one of the reasons why you might want to file your 2019 tax return now versus 2018 is because if your taxable income was less in 2019, then they'll leverage that instead of your 2018 tax return. But my understanding is that you have maybe about a 3-week window to complete all of that. And then Matt, as you're saying, they're going to be working out some of the details in terms of like what would be equivalent to a small business loan. Those will be directed through banks, is my understanding. So lending will be coming from them, and then the government will be paying the banks, and it's still a little bit fuzzy as to when those will be and what would need to happen in order for those to be forgiven.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. Sorry for jumping in.
No, it's awesome.
Awesome. So I think a good transition, since we're talking about money, is I guess what should come naturally, which is budgeting. And I guess these questions are going to be directed to you, Chrissy. Why would you recommend someone set a budget?
Because without a budget, you really lack the ability to adequately plan for your future. Setting a budget is just like going on a large road trip. You have to have your roadmap with you to make sure you get where you're going. Or in today's terms, make sure Google Maps is loaded on your phone. Without that, you can't see your end destination, and you can't plan for stops along the way. And to be completely honest with you, I was awful about budgeting up until probably 7 or 8 years ago, when I actually forced myself to sit down and try to understand how, as a working professional, I only had 2, maybe 3 months worth of savings in my account. As a financially educated, almost CPA, for me, that was a little, it wasn't something that I was proud of and I wanted to admit to. So I'm looking at my future goals and seeing on my roadmap, one day I wanted to own a house. One day I wanted to be able to ski way more than I do now. Am I on that right path? And the answer was no. So I had to ask myself some really hard questions and have a conversation with myself about, where do I want to be? How do I get where I'm going on the path I am now? And the answer was, I'm not going to get there. All right, how do I redirect myself? And that started with my budget, making sure I understood every dollar that came in, where was it going? And was I going to adequately be able to accomplish my goals in a reasonable time frame?
Right. So I guess like a question, how, just off the top of your head, how many, like what percentage of people in America, or yeah, I guess in America, do you think actually like takes budgeting seriously?
Oh, I want to say 50%, but I bet it's closer to 20 to 25% actually have the conversations with themselves or significant others on a recurring basis, right, and continually look at their goals.
Awesome. So I guess speaking of goals, what goals and considerations would you recommend, like including in a budget?
For me, quality of life now and in the future is a huge consideration. My husband is convinced he's retiring at 40. I'm glad to work until I'm 60 or 65 so I can keep traveling and having the quality of life that I want now. And keep in mind, this is going to require trade-offs in your life. One thing I recommend is, just like in a business setting, having a strategic plan for your life that's going to take you on a 5, 10, 20-year course. And also, just like in business, do a SWOT analysis. You have strengths and weaknesses when it comes to budgeting and planning your life. My weakness is shoes. And then you also have some opportunities and threats in your life. The opportunities are continued career advancement. A threat right now is this economy. I don't think anyone anticipated this 6 months ago. And how is your budget and your strategic plan set up to deal with things like this? And then lastly, make sure that in your budget, you have talked to your partner or yourself about your level of risk that you're willing to take. Personally, I'm pretty risk adverse. So a financial advisor would probably yell at me for keeping as much cash on hand as we do sometimes. But that's something that my husband and I had to come to an agreement on, that we weren't willing to lose a significant portion of our cash in the stock market.
Awesome. So I guess for someone who's like just starting out, hasn't really thought much about budgeting, how would you walk them through going about it? Like, does it involve a lot of paper and pencils and like journals, or is there like specialized software that you would recommend? Like what's the process basically?
So for my process with my personal budget, it helped to have at least a couple months of historical data. If you ask me, next month, how much money you're going to spend on food, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I'd have to look back at the past few months and say, on average, it was X amount. So for someone coming out of college, I would just start using Excel, or Mint is another great tool to help organize your expenses in a logical way and start tracking month over month. I would not expect a recent college grad to sit down and plan out their next year financially without getting a better idea of what kind of expenses are coming their way. So take a look at that historical data first and what may be coming down the road. And then from there, I would have an honest conversation with yourself about what is a necessary spend versus discretionary. And, you know, that sounds easy to do on paper, but then when you start looking at it, there's going to be some gray areas. Feel free to highlight those gray areas and just realize that you need to think more about that, or see later on down the road, is it necessary or discretionary? And then kind of the last stage for me is looking at if there's cash left over. To be honest, some months there's not. Is this going to be enough cash for me to accomplish some of those long-term goals? And especially someone new in their career, you may not have very many long-term goals, and that's okay. I always hated it when someone was pressuring me for a 5-year goal when I just couldn't even see myself getting through this next year on my current path. So continuing to think about what your goals may be and have a wish list of goals is also acceptable too. And then in terms of other tools, I talked about Excel, Mint, a lot of banking apps have great tools these days. Another, I'm going to use quote unquote tool that I've used is the book Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson and a few other people. Well, it's not traditionally a financial tool. It's based on guiding conversations around topics that can be surrounded by highly charged emotions. And for me, definitely personal finances is a topic that can get very emotional. You know, it doesn't specifically address budgeting, but if you have that ability to have those difficult conversations, that's going to be a great tool to have in your toolbox when it comes to budgeting and financial discussions.
Awesome. So, I guess in this recent episode, we saw a lot of businesses that basically ran out of cash and had to lay off a lot of people just to try to budget in the midst of a crisis. And I'm not sure, like maybe some of that might have been due to having a great year last year, and they tried to increase certain things. So, question for you, Chrissy, is budgeting like a set it and forget it type of thing, or how frequently do you recommend like updating it?
Oh man, I wish it was a set and be done, you know, one-time conversation, but it's not. Budgeting needs to be an ongoing conversation. And when I say that, I don't mean, you know, it's every single night having that conversation with your significant other, but rather just being aware of changes that could be coming that are going to necessitate having that conversation. You know, everyone at some point in time, you're going to deviate from your budget. It could be a completely justified expense you didn't see coming, or an emotionally charged mistake. And having those conversations ahead of time on how to deal with these things that are going to come up is very powerful. You know, this past year, my family's been through a lot. Currently, me and my husband are both unemployed by choice. We obviously did not see this economy coming. So budgeting has been something that we've talked about nonstop. So we went from traditionally having a yearly budget to more of a week to a month conversation, a lookout of what's coming up, what do we need to be prepared for, and making sure that we're on the same page as to what's going to happen.
Awesome. I guess when it comes to budgeting, I mean, there's going to be things that we need versus things that we want. And so I guess the question would be, if there's something that may not be a need, such as like, you know, the family wants to take a vacation, and if cash goes out in the vacation door, then that leaves less cash for something that might be a need. I guess, how do you navigate those waters?
So we prioritize our expenses somewhat. You know, in our first bucket over here is going to be the things that we have to pay, right? Our mortgage, our daycare. I have to feed that little kid. Sometimes I don't want to, but I do. And then the second little bucket here is kind of our fun expenses. One thing my husband and I have found is that we're not great at doing a 100% strict budget. We kind of like to have a little bit of wiggle room. So we've set each other a dollar value that we're allowed to spend every month with no questions asked on whatever you might need. That's our fun spend money. And then the third bucket over here is, you know, the savings. not just retirement savings, but also that level of cash in total that we need to have on hand so that we're comfortable. So when things happen, like a huge vacation, you know, if you think about on one side is mortgage necessities, the other side is our cash savings. If we're shrinking our cash savings, you better believe that next month, what's going to get squeezed in the middle is our fund spend, and that gets cut down. And also when it comes to things like fund spend, if any of you know me on this call, I travel a lot. It's a huge passion of mine. And one thing my husband and I talked about over the past couple of years is, are we using things like credit cards in the right way to really support what we want to do? So we went through and got rid of a couple credit cards that were, you know, giving me gift cards to Banana Republic, which was a lot of fun to go spend, but I'm getting a lot more value for what I want to do out of some of those flight points that we now accrue. So taking a look at not just your budget, but how you're earning money from other possible sources that can help support your long-term lifestyle.
Right. So I would say like would be a good place for the audience to vacation, like a fun place, like maybe a dream vacation of yours.
Oh, so my husband and I, we have kind of a list of everywhere we want to go in the world. And when we plan a vacation, people laugh at me, but we don't plan it based on, oh, I really want to go spend a month in Thailand. We base it off of, well, we have some time off of work. Where can we get the cheapest flights? So we did Budapest. We got super cheap flights there. We just did a trip to Portugal and Spain because we found super cheap flights. So trying to keep it open on, I'd go just about anywhere in the world, but where can I afford to go?
Right. All right. So we're now going to open up to questions to our panel. I'm going to be asking questions to the panel, and then we'll transition into asking questions from the audience. So first question would be, how do we decide what to spend cash on? And I'll go first. So my needs are kind of weird. I like to spend cash on ways to increase my income, and that usually involves buying more debt and using the debt to invest. So basically, I like to use money to gain leverage to increase my income, which is weird, but that's what I like to spend my money on. I guess Matt, you're up next.
I like that. That's cool. That's like the whole premise of Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Guy Kawasaki.
Yeah.
That whole book. Buy things that make you money and don't buy things that don't.
Right.
That's really cool. Yeah, for me, I mean, so like I said earlier, I have 5 kids. So that's a prime, I'm the sole income. So that's primarily the first spot where money needs to go. As soon as that's set, then I'm actually putting money kind of a lot like you, Sly. I'm putting it into places where it will grow. And then after the needs are taken care of, the future growth is taken care of, then the extra is where I spend cash on whatever may make me happy today, like lifestyle stuff. But I like to make sure that I like to lump in. So if you wanted to incorporate this as part of a budget, I like to lump in personally, like the future me as one of my expenses. We'll put it that way. So your utilities and your mortgage and your taxes and all that stuff, plus your future you, which would be your retirement accounts or just an investment account or whatever it is that's making you money, put that there. And then the cash at the end can be on things like going out to eat or whatever else is interest. We don't go very far because 5 kids at a restaurant is kind of stressful. So for us, it's not that. It's more like having people over is probably where we'll spend the money. We're not going to go. It's just we're paying for added stress to go out in long. The oldest is only 8, I should say, between ages 2 and 8. So it gets chaotic in a restaurant or other places like that.
Awesome. And then Chrissy, you're up next.
Yeah, for us, my husband and I had a really heartfelt conversation a couple years ago before my son was born, because we were going to be going through this huge budgeting shift of it was just us, dual income family. Now we have a kid, and Matt knows how expensive kids are. I complain about my one in daycare, so can't imagine some other families who are having a much bigger cost than me. And with the money that's going to be left over, what do we want in life? And you know, he had things like he's a marathon runner. He likes to ski. Skiing is very expensive. And making sure that we're setting cash aside for things that make us whole as people outside of being a parent and being a working professional. For me, it's travel and the opportunity. I've been planning to take some time off this past year just to reset my values, reset my goals, take a look at, am I happy doing what I'm doing? The answer is yes, I do like financial planning. And making sure that we set ourselves up for things that are coming down the road, which was me taking time off.
Nice. So next question to the panel would be, as Matt mentioned, this is a unprecedented time. I can attest to that. Like a lot of the events that happened in the last month really were never in anyone's like data set. So basically, which means it was outside of traders' models. A lot of traders like could not see this coming in the data. It just happened out of nowhere. So the good news is many of them stayed alive, and now this data is incorporated in the data set. So moving forward, should this happen again, it'll be an amazing time. But the question would be, how do we respond in periods like the one we are in now, given our different perspectives? I guess I'll start. As everyone knows, like right now, the interest rates are at rock bottom lows. So I'm a huge debt advocate. So I'm out there trying to get the lowest loans I could get for the investment of putting that money to work. I'm also looking at, as I mentioned, that this data set that just happened in the stock market, this is unprecedented, but now it's all the models have been updated. So like I said, if this happens or continues to happen, it's probably going to be a decent time for some traders in the market. And I guess it's just, this happens to be my first like real world recession. If we go into a recession, I have no idea, but it's the first time I've seen personally this type of fear in the market. Basically what happened is, we call it panic selling. It's where people sell without a reason, just because everyone else is doing it and it's the end of the world type of scenario. And it's my first time seeing actual panic selling, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, my advice to people, I guess, it should be, you should expect like anything can happen. Like that's the first step, right? If you're going to put money in the market, you should expect anything can happen. Like the markets can close, something can happen that you're not going to expect. So things like this, be prepared. This may or may not be the opportunity of a lifetime, but make sure you sit down and you think it over and make sure it makes sense for your situation. I guess I'll move on to Matt now.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this one with the story. So I used to play minor league baseball. I played 5 seasons of minor league baseball in the Kansas City Royals organization. So when you're in that level, there's 25 guys a team times 7 teams plus some more guys. There's a lot of guys competing for a 25-man roster at the big league level. So you have a lot of people that are kind of nipping at your heels, and you're nipping at a lot of other people's heels. So what ends up happening without you even trying, you try to actually not do this, but is you try to make the decisions, the general manager style decisions yourself. Meaning like, I think this guy's performing poorly, so I think he should be moved down. I should get moved up. Or this person should be probably going to get traded, as this part frees up a roster spot at the level above me, which means I should. So you start to play GM. And all of these things actually take up real valuable mental space, and they do nothing but stress you out. Because at the end of the day, and this is the point of this answer, at the end of the day, you have zero control over what the GM decides. You can control your actions on the field, but oftentimes you can't even control the results of your actions. So really, like, you swing the bat, you can't control, once you make contact, where the ball goes. You're done, right? So the same thing is true when you're trying to decide who's coming, who's going, who's moving up, who's going down, who's getting released. You just get very, very stressed out over stuff that you cannot control. It sounds like, I don't want to minimize it, but it's literally the same thing as sitting in traffic and getting upset about the traffic. You can't stop it. You can't make it go away. It's just is what it is. And that's how this market is. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had the worst day since 87, then the best day since 08, and then immediately the next day was this new worst day since 87. And then this past week we had the best day since 1933. I mean, you can't control these things, nor can you predict them. So if you sit and worry about your money going up, down, whatever direction, you're going to stress yourself out for no good reason because it's out of your hands. What you can control is the actions and the steps you take to position yourself for wherever you're trying to go. So the way I handle situations like this, I worry about what's in my control and I try to let the rest go like water off a duck's back as best as possible.
Thanks, Matt. That was like the perfect feed into what I was going to say is obviously no one can predict what's going to happen today, tomorrow, in the next few months. But this is a great time to turn and look back at your budget and what you have been spending and all those things in your control. So that poll that just popped up, there's 30% of you that don't have a budget. I know what you're doing this weekend now, is you should be looking back at that historical data to try to figure out what's in your best interest going forward, given the uncertainty of the market. Do you need to start trimming back to just be a little bit more conservative and cautious during this time? Or are you okay with the path that you're headed on right now? You know, for my family personally, I'm still looking for a job. A lot of job prospects have dried up in the past few months, and that happens. It's the way of the job market. But my husband works for a startup that just lost some of their seed funding. So we're both looking at, can we continue down this path of both technically being unemployed right now? How long do we have? What do we need to cut out to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and our family given this uncertainty in the market?
Awesome. So, yeah, just I guess some motivation for everyone. I mean, this is not just affecting, like everyone is affected in some way. I mean, there's business top in their field just a few months ago, and now they're starving for cash. I mean, that's to show everyone how interconnected our whole economy is and how quickly it can change. So I would say, for people, don't beat yourself up. I mean, stay strong and just, like Chrissy said, know what you want in life and just try to plan for it. Does any of the panelists have anything else they want to talk about? No. I guess, does anyone and any one of our attendees have any questions that they wanted to be answered that were not touched? If so, I guess you could raise your hand or send a question. I'm not seeing any.
Let's see, I see a question.
Yeah,
from
but
other ways to access cash. Yeah, go ahead.
Did someone have something to say?
There's a question about some other ways to access cash in this economy. I'd like the financial advisors to touch on it first before I toss in my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, there are loans and ways to leverage your, not that I'm necessarily recommending taking out additional loans, but we talked about it earlier with the CARES Act. There's access there to cash that literally, 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, a few days ago didn't even exist. There's other things you can do. This is probably closer to a business owner conversation, but you can take it on a personal side too, is you can contact lenders. So while you're not actually accessing new cash, what you're doing is postponing or deferring payments. And in times like this, you can call your credit card lenders, your mortgage lenders, people that are expecting you to make payments and defer them. And while that's not an ideal scenario, it is a way to put cash back into your pocket, at least for the short term. So there's that. I mean, an obvious answer is a side hustle, but I think that's a tough road to navigate right now. But I would make an intentional effort to really look at anywhere where you have debt outstanding. And Sly, you could probably speak to this because you're the debt master, you said, where you have debt outstanding and find ways to renegotiate terms, rates, things like that, because it ends up putting cash in your pocket, even though it's not like the government sending you a check in the mail. Money saved is money earned.
Fully agree.
Yeah, when it comes to deferring things, my husband and I have started talking about if it gets to that point, what can we defer? Obviously, we don't want to have to do that, but just being able to defer our tax payment that's due in a few weeks for a couple months, we're considering doing that just to make sure we have that extra cash. We also have some CDs where we looked at it, and it's like a $30 penalty to break that CD. If we need it, then that's a great access for cash. So take a look at some of those that you may have, and it may be worth going ahead and breaking that to get the cash out now to make sure that you're set up for the next couple months.
Yeah, one other, if I interrupted you, Chrissy, I saw in this most recent bill passed that there may be a forgiveness on that 10% penalty, typically on a 401k plan where you're 59.5 before you take it out. Otherwise, you get penalized 10% on top of your taxes. There's going to be, it looks like, a forbearance on that penalty for coronavirus related needs. So it's something to look at. If you're affected by this, again, I still have to read through all of the details, but I think you can probably take money out of your 401k if that's where you're at and you need it. That's cash that you could use without being penalized, which is a good thing.
And there was another poll question, basically, have you heard anything about mortgage relief, especially at the federal level? They said, I thought I heard this was proposed as part of the relief packages.
I haven't. I've heard talks and requests of it, but I haven't heard anything official coming out of Washington that I could speak to. It's so far anything that I heard, I think I would categorize under the speculation category versus really actual facts. So I've heard of it. It may happen. I think that's going to create a different snowball for real estate investors and owners of multifamilies, but we'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, the economy has to get back on its feet. So I don't know anything official on that one personally.
There's also some guidance in the CARES Act regarding student loans. So for those of you that do have student loans out there, it might be something to do with a little bit more research, and that might be a payment that you can delay through your federal student loan program.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not seeing any more questions.
Yeah, I guess without knowing any questions, a comment that I will make in this time is that there's always opportunity in chaos. I will say that. It takes work and it takes action to figure out where that opportunity may be. But this is to anybody that's feeling that pinch out there. I do know, and this is maybe a bit of a motivation versus a financial advising comment, but I do know that things won't come your way if you sit and wait for them. So whatever it may be that's stirring inside you that might be on your mind, you're going to have to go get it, because a lot of people are wondering, everybody got hit by a bus and everyone's trying to figure out how to get back up. And I will say that those people that figure out how to get back up and start running again are the ones that, whenever this virus passes us by and the economy's back on its feet, the ones that got back up and started running most quickly are the ones that are going to be way, way, way out ahead. I do know that for certain.
This is definitely, for at least the younger generation, probably the first time they're seeing this from a professional side, which is a potential recession or at least a huge hit to our economy. And I encourage people to think about this experience, especially in the few months when hopefully this passes, and what positive takeaway you can take from this experience and apply when, to be honest, this will happen again. There will be something that hurts our economy, brings it down, causes us to go into recession. What can you plan for now and think about now to use in hopefully like another 30 years when this happens again, not another 10 to 12, but it's going to happen again. So let's start planning as best as we can to make sure we're set up for the future.
Fully agree. I mean, yeah, I would say, again, it's to your knowledge level, it's to your comfort level, but I would definitely agree there are opportunities out there to the long and short side. But again, it's based on what you know. That's my take on it. I do see that we have another poll question. Person asked, did you have a chance to discuss other investment options that are out there? Yeah, that's and it said we received the following. CD penalties are for AGI deductions as well. I guess we could talk about like other investment options. I guess we've been talking a lot about the markets.
Yeah, for example, cryptocurrencies, REIs. Are there anything else out there that you guys are tracking potentially right now as investment vehicles for the future?
I mean, I'll speak. My answer is no, but it's not.
Yep,
go ahead, Sly.
No, I was just gonna say, real estate is always a solid asset class. I mean, the data shows it has made more millionaires than any other asset class because in real estate, typically people from the beginning are using some of the tools of money, which includes leverage, cash flow, and arbitrage in the sense that a tenant is paying for your debt payments. I mean, it may or may not be an appropriate subject for this time that we in America that we might be in a cash freeze, but I'm just saying it's an idea that's out there.
Yeah. So the reason I'm not looking at other investments has nothing to do with the other asset classes being good or bad. The reason is because we are really good and specialized in our investment strategy in stocks. So what I will say to anybody that's listening and is wondering what should I be investing in, my first answer is that whatever you're investing in, make sure either you or the person that is investing your money on your behalf is an expert in that area. And that's okay to have multiple experts. Some of the wealthiest people in the world have specialized investors for certain asset classes: a venture capital person, a stocks person, a bonds person, a mutual fund person, a real estate person. And that's okay when you get to that level and when you want to have multiple people as part of your staff, wonderful. But what I will say is don't invest a dime anywhere without having a strategy, a game plan, really being able to identify what you're going to buy, really when you're going to sell, and what you're going to reinvest those proceeds in before you start to invest. Because what happens once money's on the line and money's on the table and things like right now happen, your emotions will take over if you don't have a strategy in place in advance. So make sure whatever you're doing, you or somebody else is an expert in it, and they have a game plan for buying, selling, reinvesting in advance of putting a dime into anything. It doesn't matter if it's fine art or cryptocurrency.
Fully agree. There's two more poll questions. One of them is following up on the last question. I think someone asked about mortgage relief and wasn't sure if we answered it or not.
Probably didn't answer it the way you'd maybe want to hear. I don't have personally. I haven't heard an official word on that.
All right.
I'm gonna jump in on that real quick too. We actually have one of the presentations next week is going to touch on this. My understanding is one of the states, so we're double checking on this, but it sounds like one of the states is either has this in the works or might have passed something in regards to mortgage relief. And then of course there's, I believe, 3 banks that have come out and provided between 30 days to 90 days of mortgage relief. And so what they're doing is they're deferring the amount owed to the end of the mortgage rather than requiring you to pay it within that, after that 30 to 90 day period. Sorry, Sly, was there something else that you were going to add to that?
No, I was just going to say that there was another poll question. If you're finished, I wasn't sure if you're finished or not.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so question is, what impact do you think the stimulus might have on the economy and unemployment?
I want to be hopeful. I really do. My concern right now is it's going to take a little bit longer in terms of the stimulus check for people for it to get there. And we're already dealing with record unemployment. And for those people, that's really scary to know that they might not have help coming until May. It's going to take a while. They're already going to be in a little bit of a hole. And I think it might help a little bit. I don't think it's going to be the massive jump that people want it to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reality of this situation is that we're in a global health scare first and economic scare second. I don't think there's anything that this is a personal opinion. So take this for what it's worth, but I have a hard time believing that anything that the federal government does from a stimulus standpoint, whether it's reduce rates, flush cash into the system, anything they do will really have a dramatic change on the direction of the markets and the economy until the American people feel like, okay, we have a handle on this virus and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not saying that the virus is gone, but I think once American people feel confident in the future of where we're going to go with this thing, then maybe federal intervention there could maybe institute a little bit more change. Up until then, I think we're just going to continue to see this wild up and down volatility.
Yeah, I would fully agree. I mean, the stock market is basically a confidence game, and the government understands that. I personally think the last thing that they want to have happen is companies go bankrupt, because that's going to mean more unemployment, and we might slip into a place where people are not confident enough to spend money, and then that's going to put pressure, like downward pressure on the economy, which I don't think anyone wants. So I think the money that they're sending into the economy is basically to try and bolster everyone's confidence, which may or may not be a good thing. I think it's probably more positive than not, but we will see.
And also, in addition to the federal programs that are coming out, also look to your state. I'm assuming a lot of you are in Colorado, and Colorado has started to announce more stimulus packages and small business loans to help keep some of those smaller businesses that are now shut down for the next at least 6 more weeks for a lot of these restaurants, to help them stay afloat during this time, so that hopefully they can make it to that point where we can now go back to those businesses and they'll still be there, because it's going to be really sad if some of them close.
All right. I guess, Ashby, did you have any final thoughts? We're kind of getting close to our time.
I don't.
All right.
But thank you.
I have one. I'll have one more comment. I think maybe a lot may be in that 2 to 10 year range potentially. I'm not sure. But I will say that 2 to 10 year range from retirement. Excuse me. But I will say that even if you're there, there's still a lot of time left. So don't stress out like the world just ended, because it didn't. If you retire, let's say at 65 and you live till 90, that's 25 more years. And if you're 10 years out from that, now we're talking multiple decades that you still have to invest. So your retirement plan didn't just go down the crapper. Like, life will still continue to go on. Right now it's terrible and it feels uncomfortable. But even if you're 2 to 10 years out, there's still plenty of time to have a fully successful retirement and live a full life. A lot of people feel like they just died a little bit inside, but they didn't. So that's just my word of encouragement, is that you still have a lot longer in retirement than you're really giving yourself credit for, potentially.
Awesome. I love it. So it seems we don't have any more poll questions. So I would like to thank the panelists. Ashby, thanks for putting this together, and thanks all the attendees that are on this, and hopefully you gain some insight from this. Hopefully you stay strong, and America will get through this, and the world will move forward. So hang in there, and thanks for attending.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.